critical kind of adaptive questions. Is that creating attention? And I think the answer is yes. There are lots of things in the adaptive management literature that talks about techniques and methods of adaptive management, complexity-aware methods. There's a really good white paper USAID put out. The CLA group at USAID, who I've never actually seen with my own eyes. Have you? It's so weird. I mean, these are people that, oh, really? I'm beginning to think it's like it's a conspiracy. I mean, yeah,
Dark state.
It's the dark state, right? I mean, they really produce a lot of interesting stuff about CLA's collaboration, learning, and adaptation. They're writing a lot of stuff. It's now a mandate for all USAID projects. They all have to like conform to the CLA. But I've never met a CLA person. So there's this group of people writing really good stuff that never show up at anything that I've ever attended in my life. But it's getting onto the radar and people are expecting it more and more. So yes, there is a tension there, and I think it's every organization has. And I think there's so many monitoring and evaluation people here, for instance, that I think you guys are probably in your own terms sort of wrestling with this and thinking about these things.
So one thing that we do is like our partners who implement, they're not going to be able to shift their monitoring tools, of course, but we layer on another type. So we do most of the change, or we do results mapping or other kinds of qualitative monitoring that accompanies that, and then bringing people together to interpret those that monitoring data. So I think you're right. It's difficult once you have people with your whatever they're reporting on a monthly. It is difficult to change that. So I guess complementing it and really working on the interpretation of that data.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think though a danger, and maybe you can say if this is a danger or not, Rebecca, is you have actually these two kind of parallel worldviews, right? We're doing this kind of, we have the tools to like register this sort of and collect this kind of data, and that's the important stuff. And now we're also being asked to collect this more qualitative stuff, which helps us interpret that, but that's not as important. And more importantly, the two aren't necessarily, in my mind, as an implementer or on the ground organization, I'm not looking for how those are dialoguing. So I worry a little bit. I don't know if this is the case, that sometimes one becomes still the priority because we have the tools, it's pretty straightforward, we know how to do that. This other stuff's a little squishier and it maybe doesn't, I don't know if it dialogues as much as it should.
It's definitely a risk, but I think it's part of creating that overall culture of learning and adaptive capacity.
Yes.
But then sometimes what happens is you get conflicted. So then what you have to do is go and do some sort of rapid research to figure out what it's doing.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely a risk, but I think it's part of developing that over a broader capacity and environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a risk. I think it's a necessary risk because, as you say, I mean, that's what developing or strengthening adaptive capacity is kind of all about. Is how do you wrestle? I'm sorry.
It's research.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's easy, relatively easy for us because we're research learning them.
Right.
But in the real world,
right.
Maybe not.
You've got the poor guy that has to just collect like lots of data. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious too, I think on that point, what I keep thinking about is capacity, right? And even for us as a research organization, we're constantly struggling with that capacity. And we are doing some of these things informally, just not necessarily having like these hard tools to actually analyze and do the second move.
Mm-hmm.
So I keep thinking back of what sort of incentives need to be in place for like not only organizations like us, but also funders to make sure that these things are written into proposals and we are creating the spaces to like actually do this. I'm curious to hear more of your conversations with funders and different types of stakeholders on their feedback responses, sort of your recommendations to create that space.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, another really, I mean, that is kind of the core of the, if funders don't want it and won't support it, it's not going anywhere, right? And we know that with norms, work with norms, work with so many things. There are lots of people much better qualified than I am to talk about this because they spend their life talking to donors about this. And again, these people in the UK, I think are excellent because this is who they're having the conversation with. Here, I talk to people at Hewlett and at Gates and USAID, at CDC now. Everybody, there's nobody that doesn't want it. Nobody that doesn't want it. Everybody seems to think it's critical and it's important. USAID, again, like I say, they've got this sort of covert team, SWAT team, that's producing all this excellent stuff, and yet it's somehow getting kind of isolated, kind of pocketed, and it's not infusing the donor community in the way that any of us would like. I think, again, it's a process of building adaptive capacity. So I think it's not just adaptive capacity among us and among the front lines, but really at the donor level, because if that doesn't happen, as I say, what I can say is everybody I talk to really gets it. They're excited about it. In the case of USAID, they've put the language, if you're reading proposals now, it's in the language all the time, as they're talking about, show us how you're going to be scaling up in a context, sensitive way, how you're going, right? So, I mean, I think the first stage is having the discourse in place, so I think we're meeting some success in getting people talking the talk, but whether, what it's going to take, and maybe it's just going to take time, it's going to take sort of a generation of kind of researcher and program manager at the donors to kind of move along and have new people coming in that are bringing new ideas, fresh ideas, because it's not a hard sell. I mean, it's really not. I never get anybody pushing back on any of it, And there's lots of people, like I say, in the UK, there's lots of people really working very closely with DFID and a lot of other sort of European and British donors. And it's really in a genuine way, it's in a lot of their proposals. And as we US organizations are starting to look more towards, diversifying our own sources of funding, I think we're going to find a more open kind of donor world out there.
And our job is to write it, but if it's to write into proposals and budget them,
yeah. And I think, and I'm glad you said that, Rebecca, because I think we have that responsibility too even if they don't ask for it, just say, and they're not going to argue with you. Nobody's going to argue if you say, we're offering, this is what we propose to do, da, 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 da. On the other hand, we're also putting in place different pulse taking systems, rapid, real time, they love that. Right? And based on that, we are going to modify our programs according to what we're finding on the ground. And, I mean, that's not a hard sell. But again, we have to say that's what we're going to do because we think that's what the complexity requires.
Yeah, and I guess maybe in the future as this sort of evolves, I almost wonder if it'd be useful to have some sort of budget mainstreaming adaptive management into budgets or something. So we are planning for, because oftentimes we do the same. We do the concept note, but very rarely are we connecting that to our actual operations and budgeting. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, no. Absolutely. Yeah, good point.
Actually, speaking of that, when you're on the ground and you're trying to, enhance adaptive capacity with your frontline workers, are your tools sufficient enough to do that? Or are you finding that there's a disconnect between your tools and the level of critical thinking that they need and then what you're getting on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, those tools I kind of went through kind of quickly. Those are meant for lots of different audiences. I wouldn't use all of those with the frontline worker at all. Yeah, no, lots of those wouldn't be used. Things that have been used really successfully so far has been the Koya. The Koya that we're using in Niger is really, really wonderful because you're doing focus group discussions, you're doing key informant interviews, and you're compiling what that original context of implementation was. And as the process of developing that analysis, they're thinking about, wow, yeah, we really didn't follow the plan. We really had to accommodate lots of different things going on. So even though they think they're just answering your questions, they're actually starting to think about adaptation, and they're strengthening adaptive capacity. Again, I think we all have adaptive capacity. I don't think anybody needs to, we all just do it. I do think though people need to reflect on that and reflect on the fact that, we never do what we thought we were going to do. We always have to accommodate these different shifts. And I think things like the Koya are very useful with the frontline worker in particular. Also same page activities, just getting people to if I said this, everybody get in a different group and you all think about what I meant by that. And then you bring them together and you say, what did your sort of group decide that meant? And they just see that everybody thought it meant something very, very different. It's like, if any of you were to be, if this were to come up in any sort of meeting, would any of you raise any questions about what that meant? Yeah, everybody, no, not really. And it wouldn't here, right? I mean, here in the first world, right, with all the technologies we have, everybody's got all their degrees, and we also don't ask questions. So I think that same page, which is really critical. Again, we didn't come up with that; we just brought them together into a package. Those are really useful with the front line. But other things like I think that game, I think would be sort of very useful at actually this level. With stakeholders, other stakeholders in the government, with donors, actually. So yeah, I think not everything is adapted or can be used with everybody.
Do we have any online questions?
I'm not seeing any.
Are we still online?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Yeah. If anyone has any questions for Joseph, I think we're going to wrap up pretty soon. So either, how can we do it? Just type in the box or raise your hand.
Feel free to type them.
Yeah.
Or unmute yourself.
And if anybody has any questions, that's obviously my email down there. Please feel free, if I can send you along any sort of references, because I know I sort of mentioned in passing this idea and that idea. It tries to pack a lot into a relatively small period of time. But thank you all for your attendance and participation.
For coming.
Thanks.
And thanks everybody for coming. I know it's Monday, August, and everyone has a lot with them, so I think it's really great. Everyone's able to take off a little time to reflect.
And thanks again, Rebecca and Leah, for making it
And
possible.
thank you, Leah, for the food or
Thank you.
everything.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab a piece of pizza.
There's also, do you want me to hear that?
No, thank you.
There's also salad.